Hello, everyone. This is Matthew McKenna with Mombu Pluto Academy, and we have Ora Gavriely here. I hope I got that right.
You did.
And we're going to have a quick chat. Um, would you like to introduce yourself, or do you want me to read what you have on the site, or what would you like?
Well, maybe I'll try.
Okay.
So, as Matthew said, my name is Ora Gavriely, and the way that is the way I walk and teach is called Flowering Diamond Way. I've been on the way for quite a few decades now, and on the way, I've been, first of all, getting to know myself in more and more ways, in more and more depth. And I discovered some very fascinating things and potentials, which naturally are not only my own. I moved from Great Depression and disconnection in my teens to a place in my life where, for the past, it's difficult to put time to it, but for quite a long time, I've been living most of the time, not all the time, in a state of consciousness that I choose to call the new world, as a state of consciousness. And it is not about being happy or fulfilled or all those wonderful things that we often uh, strive for. It's something different, something that I suspect is new for us all. It's a new potential for all of us. So I have a kind of way that I can track of getting from disconnection and depression to where I am right now, which isn't perfect in any way, shape, or form, but it's amazing, an amazing experience. And I think this experience is becoming available for more and more of us,
Uh,
and that each one of us that chooses to do our inner work in a way that actually works, and there are quite a few ways that actually work, um, does not only free, we do not only free ourselves and become more and more um, kind of new worlds, uh, but we are also contributing to what's going on in the collective.
uh,
So this is kind of a very, very kind of a general arc, I would
sure.
say. Um, but within that, I've both learned and developed and was given many, many approaches to the psyche and to spiritual work, which I love to teach and
Hmm.
to explore. And that includes things from voice dialogue, which is something I've been doing for, I don't know, with myself for I think 36 years, and I've been teaching it at least 26 or 27 years, which is a way of viewing ourselves as naturally made of or including many, many voices or parts or selves, inner selves, and
Is
how
that similar to IFS, like parts work?
it is similar in some respects, but not in all respects.
Uh,
But of course, this is something we won't dive into right now because it requires a lot of time.
sure.
But when done in a way that actually works, it's a really good way to accept ourselves
Hmm.
as we are and to even celebrate the both ourselves as a kind of unified organism, but also with all the amazing richness of our various inner selves that are many and very interesting indeed, characters to get to know, and that really has a lot of um, it influences our lives in unimaginable ways. So this is one of the things that I do
Yeah.
and teach. The other main work is more spiritual, or a combination of more psychological and spiritual work, and that has to do both with shamanic work, shamanic journeying, shamanic rituals, but without, in my case, without medicine.
Yeah. 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 I see that this journeying without medicine. It's really
Right.
interesting to me.
This is one of the things I'm going to talk about soon uh, in the academy, um, and everything I do also has to do with healing the past and understanding what how to make the inner work that we do actually work. So this is really, the tip of an iceberg for me, because I've really been doing it for decades. But
I, I, I'm really curious when you say this, like, actually work, as opposed to what? I mean, it- are there things that aren't working for people, or people
yes,
not having sustainable,
yes,
uh,
absolutely.
like they're learning something and not improving
Yeah.
their life? Is this?
Yes, it's a thing. Yeah. So there are many people who who devote time and energy and money. For example, who go to study, go to all sorts of workshops, go to teachers, go to therapy. For some people, you see actual change, and for some people, they seem to be doing a lot, but not much is changing. There's also a very, very strong trend nowadays, it has been for quite a while, of people who um, watch things online,
Uh-huh.
but it doesn't translate into actual inner work. So it's kind of, it's not something that becomes really an actual active part of their lives. So it's just information, which could be somewhat useful, but not much, not too useful if you don't really do it, if you
Mm.
don't implement it, if you don't really live it. So there are all sorts of ways of helping people to kind of really start doing the work, you know.
I'm curious. I've tried some different kinds of methods and meditations and shamanic journeying, these kind of things. How would I know that the difference between maybe my resistance to doing something versus it just not being right for me?
It's a great question, and it's sometimes very difficult to know at some point, but still, at least from my point of view, there are all sorts of ways of figuring it out. Would you like me to give an example?
Sure.
Okay. So one way, there are many ways. You could, of course, go on a shamanic journey and ask, for example, what's really going on here, or things like
Okay.
that. That can be very useful. Or you could, if you knew how to do it, contact what I call a spiritual source and just have a discussion about it. And if the lines are open enough, you might get really good answers. But you could also, for example, um, go through through voice dialogue. Of course, I talk about the methods that I use, and there are
Sure.
others, and some of them are really good also. But for example, let's say that I went, um, I don't know, to a workshop to learn how to meditate,
Uh-huh.
and then I don't do it, and I'm wondering, what's actually going on. Then I might kind of sit down with myself or with somebody else and ask, is there an inner self within me that doesn't want me to meditate? And if there is one, we'll probably be able to talk with this inner self and hear why exactly and who it is and what's actually going on. So that's just so it's really kind of coming from not knowing anything, being really, really open,
Mm.
just asking, is there anybody who's against this? Or is there anybody who has anything to do with the fact that I wanted to study meditation, but I'm not actually meditating? Or, this is just an example that might be relevant for 1,000 things in life, for anything really, not only workshops and things like that.
Is this similar to kind of, I know when I was first trying to like search for solutions for myself, I was really like trying to get rid of my bad experiences.
Okay.
And what you're talking about gives me this feeling of just curiosity about what's going on rather than trying to eliminate it. Like,
So true. Yes.
like there's nothing wrong with the fact that there's maybe part of me that wants to just, you know, curl up in a corner or do a tantrum and cry or
Absolutely. It might be painful. It might be something that at some point you want to kind of live through and grow out of. But it's not because it's bad or needs to be changed. That's not the way the work actually works. What would work is being really interested and curious about who is it that wants to curl up in the corner and cry, and perhaps even why. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. And how can I help him? And,
this.
it changes the whole game. And this actually works.
I believe it. I can share like my own personal thing. I've been told by people, "Oh, you need to have these kind of conversations again and again." And I was like, "I don't know how to have these conversations. They're telling me how to have it." And then I think I was going into a forest and I was like, "What if I ask the forest what they want? What the forest wants with me?" Just out of curiosity, I'm just like, "I wonder if something happens." And then there was like some sort of answer and I was like, "Wow. That is too good to be made up in my mind. Like, I have not been able to come up with this thing for months, and it
Yeah,
just comes to me. What is this?" And I
yeah,
realized I had a lot of resistance because I was trying to be someone else's version of this way of talking.
right. And
Well, I'm just curious if there's how do we like how do we learn from someone but not take on their way of doing things?
I love that question because this is so, so important. I'm getting teary even because you can't do things my way or as way because it's not your way. That doesn't work. You can be inspired. You can say, well, what do you know about it? But whatever you do, you have to figure out your own way. Always, always. It can be pretty similar sometimes, but it still has to be your own way. And that's again one of the things that makes the work. If we're trying to imitate somebody else's path, we just lose our own. And it's also about, I call it learning how to be, um, I call it a loving detective and a sensitive spy of yourself. So,
Loving
it's not just
detective.
being a spy or a detective, it's being a loving and sensitive detective.
Huh.
So you bring a lot of care to figuring it out. Should I turn right or left, or does it even matter, or what's the next step, or which teacher can help me now, or how do I move forward when I feel stuck, or to get back to what we were discussing a few minutes ago. Let's say you have this, you're wondering whether this specific method of meditating is right for you at all. So sometimes, back to voice dialogue, you might ask, does anybody have anything to say about this? And perhaps some inner self comes up. It can be a woman, a man, a child, or anything else really, and might say, this specific method causes me pain, and that's why I don't agree for you to use it. And then you can either consider it and say, wow, yeah, that inner self has a point. They do. We're not, the idea is not to shove them out of the way. He
Yeah.
might have a point, or she. So it's really listening to them, really meeting them, really being interested in what they have to say, and then considering from what I call the aware eye, whether that's the right answer for me or not.
You
So
use
then
the
it's,
aware eye.
yes.
Okay.
So the aware eye for me is kind of, it's again, it's a long story, but it's not something that can be defined, but it's a place within me that isn't identified with any self, but accepts them all.
Is this um like the field of awareness kind of place, or is it more personal?
Well, it's related to what you could call a field of awareness, but it's really also a very practical, how would I call it? A very practical state of consciousness, because we try, and now I'm talking voice dialogue. I do so many things, but this is voice
Yeah.
dialogue. We try to live our lives more and more, and it's a gradual thing. It takes a lot of time from the aware eye. So when I'm in the aware eye, I can hear various selves that may want the exact opposite things. One of them wants to, I don't know, stay in bed for the rest of my life, and another wants to go exploring the mountains in Turkey. Okay, so and they're both pulling in different directions, and I may not be aware of any of them, or I can be very identified with the one that wants me to stay in bed and not know anything at all about the other one that wants me to be adventurous in the mountains. But the more I do the work, and I really know myself, my entire being more and more,
Uh-huh.
I get some more free choice, really. But
Yeah,
it's
because
not
you're
really
not getting
going.
pulled around by one
Exactly. So I
part.
can get the information, I can understand the needs, I can be compassionate, I can learn from them, but but still I have, in a way, my hands on the wheel to a certain degree, so that one says turn right and one says turn left. And I say, okay, this time I choose to turn right, but I still listened to the one who said turn left, and I took what he said under real consideration.
Hmm.
So this is kind of for people who do voice dialogue for enough time, I find that this builds a kind of really, really good base from which you can fly really, really anywhere you like, because you've built the foundation really well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so the moment you accept and you know enough in ourselves and you kind of get it, that you get the idea that they're all there um, for a reason, and that they're all okay as they are, that they're not really good or bad, but they're just what they are, and that they all need at least something, kind of perhaps only a tiny shelf in the cupboard, not an entire room, but they need a tiny little space
Yeah.
within us to feel accepted, to feel understood, to feel acknowledged. And then the whole system starts to work. And it becomes really much more stable, much more flexible, much freer, much more dynamic and creative. And then it's much less kind of tricky to go and visit the other side of the galaxy, for example, or things like that.
All right.
Yeah, or do spiritual work.
Is this something that you teach, the voice dialogue, as well?
Well, I used to teach it a lot. It was kind of the first thing that I taught. It's also something that I wrote a very large book about, and so this was kind of my beginning in a way. Nowadays, it's part of the entire how do I call it? Kind of I forget the word. Um, a tapestry. It's a part of the tapestry of the
Okay.
flowering diamond way. But there's so much more. But it really gave me, both as a human being and as a teacher, a really good kind of foundation to understand once again what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah,
And
it sounds so great because I think about like the world we're in and how we're so ready to. I mean, I can even see how I'm so ready to say, I don't do that. That's bad for you. You should do this. This is good for me. And it's like putting things into these good and bad judging categories. And I sit around judging all day and I don't even know what's going on.
exactly,
Uh,
that's what we do until we stop doing it.
all that energy, it's tiring and it feels so unproductive.
Yeah. And again, it's not that as if judgment is a bad thing, a negative thing. It's also a part of the whole,
Hmm.
and it also needs to be accepted and appreciated. There's value in judgment also. Um, but if it rules our lives, and if we're identified with the judgment, with the self that is judging, and with the judgments, then we're in a mess.
Yeah, so this is I can really see this is maybe in a similar to some of the mindfulness practices. It's finding a way for objectivity. It's finding a way to observe and not like push or pull things too hard so that so you're having I don't want to say balance. I don't like that word. Uh like maybe acceptance of it all. Yeah, that feels right.
I think perhaps I don't know if it works for you, but some perhaps neutrality also is a good word here. Kind of,
I hear neutrality and I'm like, okay, you can tell me neutrality a million times. What? How do I do that?
so in the voice dialogue, by the way, there are many voice dialogue people around the world. I really recommend it. Um, you would usually work with two opposing polarities. So,
Oh,
for example, let's say you feel really judgmental. Okay. So you would talk with the voice in you, the self, that part that's feeling really judgmental, and you really get to know it and respect it. And then in the same session, you talk with an opposing voice, which could be all sorts of things. It could be objective, it's kind of, it's not very strong kind of opposition, perhaps, but it's there. Or it could be a voice that always sees the good in you. Whatever you do, you can go, you can do no wrong.
Huh.
You're just a beautiful man and you're always lovely. And, it can be a mother type, it can be all sorts of things.
Uh,
So once you really give room to both the polarities, then you find it much, much easier to kind of be in the middle to a certain
mm,
degree. And you can enjoy both. And you can, see how they not only fight with each other, but also complement each other and, create a kind of dynamic balance. It's a whole thing. It's, not something we can, finish discussing in a few minutes, but you get the drift, I think.
that sounds all very interesting. When I know that you're going to be teaching these courses here. When people come, will they be able to experiment with these techniques in the courses?
Well, it depends on the course. First of all, there are um, in the coming weeks, there are three things that I wouldn't call courses really. They're kind of introductions. And it's
Yeah.
kind of both an introduction to me to see if, there's, I feel right to
Mm,
people, but also to other things. So one of these things is about an hour and a half in which I will tell whoever is interested about what I mean by becoming a new world as a state of consciousness.
yeah.
How how does it feel? You know, what's the difference between kind of our regular way of life, whatever that is, and moving gradually into this state of being in each person has their own version of it, but kind of generally speaking, how does it feel? What's it all about? How do we get there? Uh, Again, no promises, but I can kind of give kind of general guides. And and if people feel called to it, then there will probably be courses in which we can really actually do the work.
Mm,
Not that one course brings you to the new world. These are um, this is serious work, but any step you do on the way is amazingly valuable, both to yourself. That's my experience with myself and with my students, and also to everybody around you.
mm.
It's really, any, so again, even if you, in this lifetime, you don't experience the new world, but so many wonderful things happened on the way, and you healed this and you transformed that, and your relationship with your father improved, and you moved. That's great.
Yeah,
From my
I've always found it really hard to quantify things. Like things seem to happen that seem not related. Like somehow I don't know, let's say I cried about, things with my brother, and then now I'm feeling more confident in asking for what I want in my relationship or something. It feels it feels related, like all related, I guess because it's all me. So this wondrous new world,
right,
like this language is a bit strange.
it is, but I think we need some strange language now, because the language we already have, well, it's kind of stale. It
Mm,
doesn't do the work in a way. So we really need to have new expressions, new, just as I said earlier at some point, being a loving detective.
Hmm.
For some people it resonates and it's a bit fresh. I don't know, maybe some other people thought about it, but it's kind of bringing new language into being in a way that helps us um, discover new ways, because the old ones we've tried for ages and ages, and it took us somewhere, but there's a lot of room for improvement. So we need to be fresh about it all as much as possible. It's not discarding the past. It's not being disrespectful for things we've learned before, but it's also being able to be to unlearn and to come from not knowing, and to be what I sometimes call the new, the wondrous new that has never been conceived.
Hmm.
The wondrous new that has never been conceived. So again, this might resonate for some people and not for others, and that's perfectly fine. But for some people, just using these words does something visceral. It just moves something, and then you can start working with that, or it just opens something that then makes something new possible, etc.
I really get that. Like when I hear that, when I first heard it, I was looking at it and I was like, there was something in me that was like almost rebellious. Like, what do you mean, new world? What? Almost like, who do you think you are?
Absolutely agree. We'll talk about that.
And but yet there's curiosity. Like, I'm like, okay, it's, it bumps up against this part of me that's I feel committed when there's that thing that's like in the back of my mind, like, what is that? And then I can't stop thinking about it, and it's like some sort of seed or path, and I just know I have to go and see what's there.
What's behind that corner?
What's behind that corner? What's behind that door? Even though I might be a little afraid.
Yes. So yeah, one of the things that are have always been um, uh, slightly difficult for some of my inner selves was that some of the things that I do sound really, really strange. And but I do notice that people who come to study with me are actually very acute, and they check it, so they don't accept things because I said them, but they experiment and they explore, and they have their skeptical sides that are active enough to doubt me. And
Cool.
if it works for them, then great. And if it doesn't, they don't need to take it. And that's always the truth. That's the way we should be doing things. But what happened in my case is that things were suddenly, coming to me. I were revealed to me because I do a lot of work, I guess. Um, so there's a lot of space for things to happen, perhaps for other reasons as well. And uh, I couldn't deny what I was experiencing on a regular basis. Now, these things uh, can be given other names. The thing is, do they work? Do they work for people?
Yeah.
And if they
Okay.
do, then that's what we want. We want people to heal. We want people to feel better. We want people to be able to do wonderful things in the world, or uh, feel that more of their potential is realized, accept themselves, the dark sides as well as the light sides, really, um, so many things. And that, if that works for some people, then, you know, I'm very happy and I rest my case. But that's the only proof that we can have. Did it work? And as you said earlier, sometimes we're not absolutely sure what worked, but sometimes we know, sometimes we absolutely know that we did this and that, and we devoted time to our inner work, whatever way we do it, and we see the change, we see our relationships change, we see the gradual expansion, the healthy renewal, or whatever it is, and we just can't deny it.
Yeah, I know that I need to, I don't know if like keep track of milestones, but I need to have like make notes before I do things.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I can get swept up, and then when I'm out of it, well, I'm not sure what I accomplished.
That's such an important thing. One of the major things I realized little by little, I wish I'd realized it even earlier, because it's so important, and that is to write things down. So you know so I have this huge journal. I write thousands of pages a year. It doesn't necessarily have to be so much. I'm really on the
Wow.
edge with that, but I document my process, because I also realized that very often, if you don't do that, after a few months, you don't remember. Sometimes even the next day, you just don't remember that it even happened. And
Yeah.
these things are so important. You may have had a breakthrough, and you don't have enough of the essence of the breakthrough kind of present for you, to continue the work, to water the plant, to build another row of bricks, whatever image works for you. And
Huh.
then it's kind of you don't get the most out of the work that you put in. That's it
Yeah.
sounds so simple, but just the habit of writing things down, journaling, is life changing. I say it with great confidence. Of course, some people may have a different way. I
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
but
I definitely like I do. I have tried it and I have seen benefit. I'm definitely one of those like less uh like writing's difficult for me. Like this conversation, I can do this, but when I'm writing, often it's 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 not like writing a foreign language, but it's a bit
mm,
troublesome for me.
right.
And but it's okay because you don't really need to write something that makes sense.
Yeah, if you have a way that works for you, again, whatever works.
Mm,
If painting works for you, or if recording works for you, or if not writing anything works for you, or not recording anything, if it works, it works.
yeah.
Uh, but for many, many people that I work with, at least, and definitely for myself, I noticed the great difference between when I did regular daily inner work and recorded it, journaled about it, and years where I just did it once in a while, when I felt the need, when there was some problem to deal with, and then I would do it. Um, and then also you have this ability to read back, or or watch your drawings, or whatever method you figure out, and and there is this thing about the inner connections within you as a sort of both, I call it a bubble of identity or a field of identity, or, I have a few words for it. The connectivity within it grows because you read something and say, oh, so that's a recurring motif. The loving detective kind
Yeah.
of suddenly understands, oh, and if you didn't have that way of recording things, then you might miss so much information, so much treasure, really.
Huh.
That's my experience. Of course, again, this everything I say is my point of view and my experience, and I really deeply realize that some people may see it differently.
So is this related to that course that you're offering, or the introduction to identity bubbles?
That's true. Yes.
I, I I was thinking it before you mentioned. I was like, maybe that's related.
It is. So at some point in my life, I began to receive information about a way of looking at reality, perhaps, or I don't know. Um, and again, there are so many ways, perhaps endless ways of looking at things.
Hmm.
But again, I always try to see whether it's useful. For me, things that are useful are really appreciated. If it's just a thought, then I like the practicality of things.
Sure.
Um, so it took a long time to kind of cook within me, but I think that I now have this way of looking at the world as not only the world, everything that is really, um, as fields and bubbles, and how that might be both interesting to experience and experiment with, but also really, really useful for inner work and for understanding what's going on. So that's the identity bubble introduction that I'm
Yeah.
going to do very soon too. Um, so I'll try also to make it somewhat experiential,
Hmm.
but it's not a workshop at this point. I'm trying to see if there are people in the academy that this interests, and if so, then I can offer something much more in-depth work.
Yeah. And maybe you can at at least go into like you're saying bubbles, and you have this word identity, but like, how is this related to the journaling, and like, I
Well, the
want to try to
journaling
better understand that.
the journaling is related to everything, kind
Okay.
of to your journey, to your adventure as a human being here in a body, uh, and trying to first perhaps figure out a little bit who you are and heal whatever needs to be healed, at least part of it, and learn what it means to transform and how do you help that happen, and figure out what more can happen, what more can be discovered, how you might develop. And so you're really kind of exploring more and more who you are. So that's kind of the journaling for me is about everyththing.
Okay.
Less about I brushed my teeth in the morning, but
Yeah.
apart from that, almost everything and anything. Um, but to go back to the identity bubbles, Would you like me to give a bit more, um, you know, of an explanation to it?
I, I find myself wanting to have something to hold on to.
Okay, great. So if you look into yourself, when we just met, we did a kind of bubble, um, I don't know, experiment or experience
Yeah.
uh, just a while ago. Uh, and so just we can use that and just see yourself for a moment as a bubble,
Mm.
okay? And the bubble can be smaller or larger, but you're completely contained in it.
Okay.
And I say that that could be called your bubble of identity.
Okay.
Okay, so this is kind of seeing yourself as something that has a sort of boundary, and this is your space.
Uh-huh.
Maybe even we could sometimes say your, if you like, your sacred space. This is yours. Here, you are supposed, from my point of view, to have sovereignty and freedom. Now, this is rarely the case in our world, but this is what we aim for.
Mm.
Now, having felt that, you can look inside and see that there are many inner selves, and you can see that each inner self is also a sort of identity bubble, which is something
Mm.
that, when you do voice dialogue, perhaps other types of work with selves, then you realize that each self usually has a unique character and
Huh.
identity. Okay. So you can see that. But you can also, for example, think about humanity as a bubble of identity
Okay.
in which there are many other bubbles. For example, all the doctors in the world could be a temporary bubble. There's so much to say about it. But anyway, this is kind of just the beginning of realizing both a kind of structure that might be one way of exploring reality,
Mm.
but it also gives you a lot of, how would I say, um, you know, what is the best way to work with that so that you don't, um, for example, step on somebody else's sovereignty, for example? How, it's really trying to figure out how this thing is working, at least to some extent. We're talking about very complex things, but also how do we live with it in a way that works better, in a way that is perhaps more kind of a new world way, again, as a
Mm.
state of consciousness. Now, this is really, really, really the tip of an iceberg. So, I can't really say much more in a few minutes. But
Sure.
did you experience anything?
I experienced like, you know, there's me, and then I experience that inside me there's like a row of bubbles, and they're all kind of like there and individual. Um, I didn't feel any one way or another when I was looking. I didn't feel like positive or negative. It felt very
Oh,
neutral.
yeah, neutral is, is good.
And same thing about when you mentioned the humanity and people. There's something about the bubbles that felt very neutral. Like it felt easy to not go into my pattern of judgment.
That's so cool. Great. Wonderful.
And there's some comfort to it.
Yeah,
It's,
that's very
it's,
nice to hear, by the way.
it's very strange.
So
I don't
it
understand.
is. It really is. No, I really want. I know this is all so strange, and I'm going to talk about shamanic journeys and all sorts of even weirder and weirder things. I really
It's
want
all
to
welcome
tell
here.
people that I'm such a practical person, also, and very scientific minded, and very grounded person. I think maybe it's felt, but anyway, I'll say it. Just
Sure.
and what I discover if people feel kind of a call or an interest in getting to know more about my experience of things and trying it out, great. If doesn't feel right, it's absolutely fine from my point of view.
Hmm.
It's different people need different things and can accept different ways, and I don't expect everybody to relate to what I'm saying. But I can say that for me, it really has been miraculous. And, I used to have quite a lot of trouble saying something like this
Hmm.
because, it sounds um, pretentious. It can sound so many things. And of course, we all have inner voices that don't want us to sound stupid or vain or um, you know just crazy. Of course, I have them too, and also the skeptics in me are very strong.
Hmm.
So I had to really work through accepting that how come me, little Aura, who has been, for more than 10 years in my teens and early 20s, depressed and disconnected and just completely out of it. Why me? Why would I get certain types of understanding and knowledge? And I had to deal with that. It wasn't at all easy for me to talk about it
Hmm.
because of the fear of judgment and the fear of and my skeptics, even saying, what if you're wrong? What if you're leading people the wrong way? I'm a pretty responsible person.
I know this part of me.
Yes. So, but again, I can sit in the corner and, do nothing, or I can say, well, this is working for me. You might want to try it or some of it for a little bit. And then if it brings some blessings to other people, then that's for me, it's wow. And if it doesn't, then okay, but I've tried.
So I I'm I'm curious about, like, you're saying it works for you, and like how does this how does this work for your students? Like, how has it worked?
Well, it's worked very, very well. Otherwise I wouldn't dare to, if it was only for me, then okay, that's cool, but lucky me. But little by little, whatever worked for me that I discovered, I suggested, and some people said, okay, we wish to try it. And only when I saw that it was working for other people do I kind of go more public about it.
Yeah.
Now, there are certain things that I'm experiencing at this point in my life that my students don't experience yet because they started a little later. So
Sure.
these things take time, and the road is very different for all of us. But the people that were called to work with me and that I was called to teach, I see as partners on the way. And they say that their lives are healed and transformed. Again, it's not, it's not something that happens like that. And it's continuous work.
Yeah.
But I look at them and I see, yeah, for them at least it works. Probably for others it might work as well.
I'm curious, how does it feel to do that? To offer something to someone and for them to have this like real change in their life?
Well, for me, first of all, it's amazingly satisfying. It's like a feeling of, hmm, it feels as if I'm doing my work
Hmm.
and it does some good in the world. It's wow, it feels very purposeful for me, and also, I think it's the most moving thing for me in
Hmm.
life. There are many moving things for me in life, but it's definitely way at the top. If somebody says to me, this and this changed for the better, or the work is really working for me, and to how it is to feel that we have an impact that is hopefully positive and doesn't cause harm. By the way, that's very important.
Hmm.
That's very, very rewarding. It gives me a lot of joy and a lot of that's what comes for now, at least.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of how I feel when I like, mm, I'll share an example. I was involved in the Black Lives Matters protests,
Yeah.
and I was helping with the sound systems so that Black youth could go up there and speak. And there's something in me that just was so satisfied about giving these talented young people the microphone and then seeing them just kill it. Just like, wow. Oh, this is why I say I have this calling about amplification.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Like giving you a place for you to share this with people, it means a lot to me. And it's taken me a while to understand, to like listen to that part of me that's satisfied, that's interested, and I plan to do it more.
Sounds like a very good idea.
Let's see. Did you have another course?
Right, right. Yeah, it's a good idea to talk about that as well. So the third thing I'm offering in the next few weeks is, again, it's only a very, very short introduction of uh, the possibility of going on shamanic and spiritual journeys without the assistance of medicine, whether plant or anything else at all.
Hmm.
And it's not that I'm against using plant medicine, and many of my students also, make use of that as well. But for me personally, it wasn't the right way to go.
Hmm.
So I really spent a lot of time and energy in discovering how to help myself go on such journeys, which, for example, shamanic journeys is, it's who knows how old this knowledge is. I think it's always been there in humanity from a very, very early age. So how to help myself go on these journeys, and how to help others go on such journeys in a way that is both effective and safe, and also very relatively easy to do, because you don't really need to go on a retreat for that. You can just, once you know how to change your state of consciousness, then you can just lie on your carpet in the living room and go. Or, there are many other ways as well. So this is kind of something that I really want people to know, because whether people are into using plant medicine or any other forms of medicine or not, it's really, really useful to have this way as well.
Hmm.
So whether they use it or they just don't do anything, because for some people, for example, are afraid of using substances and medicine. So many people just don't know that there's a substanceless way that can work for them. Now, shamanic journeying and spiritual journeys in general, for me, have been life-changing,
Hmm.
really. And for many, many, many of my students, it's just, I'll give you a few examples. Again, each life is different, each person is different, but
Sure.
one of the magical things that can happen is that you find support. So many people, don't have that. So many people, we can be so alone and in need of both kindness and care and also good advice.
Hmm.
And once you get into it, and you have to, for some people it's just amazingly easy, and for some they need to practice for a while until it becomes really useful and easy. But just imagine that you can go for 30 minutes or 20 minutes on a shamanic journey, and you
Hmm.
know how to do it in a safe way, and you meet a teacher and you can discuss your life with him or her or it, for example, or you can go on a journey and go through a transformative experience, without using any substance, or experience great healing, or learn about yourself, or even, sometimes get, it's a huge world. Um, for example, I remember at one point, many, many years ago, I met on a journey, I met one of my teachers,
Hmm.
shamanic. We're talking about spiritual things. It's not a living person. And he kind of uh, taught me how to use a sword. And we had a sword fight because,
What?
yes, in the journey. Now, this for some people can seem, completely unspiritual or something. But one of the fascinating things about shamanic journeys of this kind is that it's so specifically tailored for each person. So at that point in my life,
Hmm.
that was the training I needed to kind of be a bit more, um, to have more fight in me, and to have this kind of, kind of ability to
Yeah.
slice through things, and to help my students that way as well, and to help myself that way as well. So that's what I got. But a different journey could be, receiving this amazing healing massage, or it can be going through a
You
transformative.
can get a massage in a journey.
Well, I did, yes, and it's,
What?
you can actually feel it, and again, it's what happens to one doesn't necessarily happen to
Sure.
another, but no. And this is again something I see both with voice dialogue and with journeying, shamanic journeying and with talking with spiritual sources. And I have so many students who say that this has changed their lives. And it's not really about me. It's just about, I have the experience, and I share it, and I like sharing the stories as well, which is
Sure.
also new for me, by the way, relatively. To be less private and to agree to tell my stories and my adventures, which are very, very strange often. But seeing that it inspires, and seeing that it gives sometimes courage to people to do their own thing, again, wow, I feel very fortunate in
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I know that like my more wild experiences, sometimes I feel really timid about sharing them because
Yes.
they're so intense and intimate,
Hmm.
and I wonder if it's for me or for others, this question I have.
Of course, I don't share everything, and not immediately, definitely. It
Hmm.
has to be the right time, the right place, and it has to be for a good reason.
That's true. Not just to share.
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense. So, like, if you were to compare, let's say, like a mushroom journey with, uh, and everybody's going to have wild, like very different experiences. You could have a good experience, medium. Sometimes there's nothing. But how would you compare that to like this kind of shamanic journey? Is it? Oh, I have a lot of questions.
Well, first of all, as I said, maybe I wasn't clear enough. I never went on a journey with any substance, any medicine, but I do have many, many students who did and do both types.
Hmm.
So I can't really say from my personal experience about a mushroom journey or an ayahuasca journey, because I never did it, not in this life at least.
Yeah.
uh, but my students say, first of all, for some of them, the experience is just as powerful.
Hmm.
And the ability to just do it without a week of preparation, without, a week of preparation can sometimes be a good thing anyway, but you don't really need, once you're good at it, you don't need to have somebody with you necessarily. You don't need to go on a retreat. You don't, it's yours.
Hmm.
It's part of our birthright as human beings to be able to receive this help and to explore and to have this this amazing gift. um, and of course, another important thing that kind of makes it really good to at least have both ways is that when you ingest something, then you're on the ride. Usually you can't stop it. Most people can't, at least. You
Yeah.
can't snap out of it.
You're in the bus and it's not stopping until you get to the next destination.
Exactly. Which has its value, of course. But when you do journeys and other such work without medicine, then it can still be extremely powerful. And very often you don't know what's going to happen next.
Hmm.
But still, you can simply open your eyes, and generally speaking, you're out of it. And if you do it wisely and safely, then it can also be very safe.
Are there dangerous ways that people are doing shamanic journeying?
Of course,
Hmm.
of course. There
Uh,
are, dangerous or unhealthy ways that people do everything.
Okay, okay.
So, almost any, method can be abused
Hmm.
in so many ways. So it's
How can we tell, like, how is it easy to identify that something is being abusive?
well, in the beginning, when people just start out, sometimes it's less easy, but that's part of our um, evolution as really, I would say, our own um, guides on our own way. We need to figure it out. So
Hmm.
yes, sometimes you can get a lot of help from reading a book or going to a workshop, or some things you don't have to learn from A. You can jump on the train and get some of it already explored for you, and then yeah, often you can go farther because you've received um, some knowledge from somebody who's been there, and you don't need to figure everything out for yourself. So
Is this a little bit similar to, like, maybe I'm just thinking of Theravadan Buddhism, how they're aware of the pitfalls,
yeah,
the very common, like,
yes,
if you go down this path, you may get progress, but eventually you're going to have some attachment that's very hard to get rid of.
yes. So absolutely, it is similar, and yet I want to say something about it, and that is, for me, it's really, really important to learn how to not know. Now,
Mm.
whenever there's dogma of any kind, you know, I'm I have a problem with that. And things
This
tend to
is
be
when your sword comes out.
dogma,
Yeah.
so very easily, both within ourselves. We know for sure what is possible and what is impossible for us and for humanity, and and both in religions, and this is one of the things that I hope I succeed all my life to steer clear of, so that the way I teach and the way I work won't turn dogmatic. That's at least what I try to do, because we never really know everything, and things are also dynamic. They change, we change. I don't like closed doors. I prefer them to be at least potentially open, checked. Okay. And the more you do the work and you become a better detective and a better loving detective and sensitive spy, uh, you learn how to sense these things more quickly, and you also have more guidance. So if maybe 20 years ago I wouldn't be able to sometimes consult with my guides, for example, and I say consult, they never tell me what to do, and if they did, they wouldn't be my guides. But it's good to have a second opinion,
Yeah.
on many matters, and to have advice, and to have to get all sorts of other points of view or from their knowledge. But then it's always my decision and my responsibility, and kind of, should I open this door now? Should I not? You hone the skills as you do the work.
Yeah.
Some of us have it more kind of inbuilt. Built, is that how you say?
Built in.
Built in, right? It didn't sound right. So some of us have kind of more of it naturally, and some of us need to kind of learn how to do it more and more. But it's really in the training.
Mm. Yeah. This is feeling really good for an end. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think
Mm.
so.
Thank you so much for sharing.